Yellow and Blue is supported by utilities from Europe. So we invest in areas which are very much of interest to the utility space and in particular to the European utility space. So that leads to three areas of interest. The first one is biomass. Biomass is a very interesting material for power generation because it is renewable base load. And as we know, wind and solar are intermittent, and that needs to be compensated by something else which is stable, which is biomass. And we are looking at technologies which make biomass suitable for coal-firing in coal-fired power plants. So that's area one. Area two we're interested in is the smart grid. The whole distribution of power needs to be upgraded because traditionally power was generated from a large power plant to the consumer, which is, let's say, a waterfall method. And since we now have decentral generation, you get a low tide, high tide movement on the grid. And therefore you need new technologies to do that. So that's area number two. Number three is energy efficiency. And that can be across very different sectors. It can be energy efficiency in the industry, energy efficiency, for example, in buildings, but also in electric vehicles or in consumer situations. So those are the three areas: biomass, smart grid, and energy efficiency. The criteria is that companies need to have a post-prototype technology. So an idea is not good enough. We like to invest in a company which has a working prototype and is at the verge of commercialization. Our fund, Yellow and Blue, is very specialized in helping companies to commercialize the technology, so to bring it to the market. That is a very important criteria for us. In terms of technology, we need to have, let's say, a proprietary technology. And last but not least, of course, we look for people who have track record in their industry, very good management, and which are able to scale the technology and are able to work with a venture capitalist. It is not a given that entrepreneurs can work with a board and with an investor who asks regular reporting and so on. So those are some of the criteria we use in selecting our companies. Let me see, in a general level, there are maybe 1,000 deals a year in this space, but there are only very few good ones. And of course, we would like to invest in the few good ones. And how do you spot them? Usually I say when a company is fundraising with a business plan and a fundraiser, I may be too late, because then the business plan is also on the table of my colleague investors, and then we are competing with each other. What I therefore do is we have a very active network of analysts and also friends of the company who spot companies by going to trade shows, universities, smaller companies, friends, and we try to spot new trends in the space. One of an example is a company in the field of demand response. A few years ago, we met a few people who had been working in the States, and they saw the concept of demand response. We said, okay, why don't we do that in Europe? And so we helped them to start a company before that started become, let's say, very important for Europe. So then we got the Fukushima disaster in Japan. As a consequence, the German government decided to abandon all nuclear power, and as a compensation, they needed demand response as a facility. So our company was timed exactly at the right moment to come into the market. The conference is great because it opens up my perspective on the needs for the Asian market. The Asian market I see has very different criteria, very different characteristics. You can say power is power all over the world. Well, that's not true. Utilities in Asia have different needs. They are very much into building capacity, generating more and cheaper power for the increasing population here, and issues like uptime and so on are less important than they, for example, are in Europe. Second thing which I find very remarkable is that the whole CO2 discussion, so the greenhouse gas emissions, are less important at the moment, but I think they will become that in the future. In the next conference, I think what we could address more is the whole integration of information technology in the utility space, because those are two completely different worlds, and I think that the information technology, or ICT in general, applied to the utility space will give an enormous innovation cycle which is needed to increase efficiency and to bring costs down.